So welcome to the last session of the retreat. So it just went in the blinking of an eye, but it is a very short retreat, which is felt for me like it went very deep, but it's not over yet. We're still kind of bathing in the ruby red light of Amitabha, and in a moment we're going to hear again from Atulyamitra, and then we'll have a chance to go into our breakout rooms to report out, and there will be time enough to discuss what Atulyamitra shares, and then we'll be doing a short piece from Transcendental, and then there'll be a closing ritual and metta, and we'll be finished by 10 to 1. So I'm looking forward to what Atulyamitra has to say about Amitabha again after that kind of vivid evocation of his qualities and his light yesterday. So over to you, Atulyamitra.
Sorry, little glitch there. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. I thought what we could do is that we could just start by sitting for a few moments and connecting with our breath. Perhaps you've had a busy morning since the meditation. So just connecting with the body, in contact with the seat, the support beneath you. And then just coming to settle on the breath. Every thought arises from mind. Every word originates in mind. Word, thought, inseparable from mind. Amitabha, the infinite, boundless, compassionate mind. Inseparable from us. I breathe in. Om Amideva Hri. Breathing out. Om Amideva Hri. With each beat of my heart, Om Amideva Hri. In many ways, it feels like I'm only landing into the retreat and it's time to go. Excuse me. Sometimes that can happen with short retreats, and yet we can go very deep, as Barbara has said. and our experiences can be extremely rich. And I think the beauty of that is that when we leave the retreat, when we leave our retreat conditions, we continue to feel the benefit of what we have spent the time doing as we took time out to be on retreat and to create our own Pure Land, our own Buddha land over the last, let's say, 48 hours, day and a half, close to 2 days. Who knows what time it was, maybe an eon or two. So all those millennia ago on Friday evening, we came together and we started by connecting with Amitabha. And we did that through ritual and through visualization and evocation of Amitabha. If you remember, we sat for a few moments in the image of the setting sun, the orb of the setting sun. And so what was happening was we were beginning to connect on a deeper level and in a simple way. We had the dedication ceremony, and part of that dedication ceremony would have been holding the intention for what we were wanting and hoping to get, to gain, to bring to the retreat. And then on Saturday, moving on, we began to have a deeper introduction to Amitabha. And we did that through the talks, through visualizations, through ritual. You'll have noticed that we've done quite a bit of ritual and meditation, as well as that logical, analytical, cognitive stuff around discussions and talks. And of course, we accessed our imaginative faculty, that creative side of mind, through the beautiful story that Maitreya told us, the story of Amitabha. I also touched on the mudra, and particularly the space within the mudra, the posture, the position of the hand position. And we talked about shunyata, emptiness. I described it as unlimited potential arising. Pavra reminded us that Bhante Sangharakshita has described it as unfathomable, indefinable, the mystery of the true nature of things. And that's what we've been trying to access and connect with over the last day or so. So today what we're going to do is simply begin to bring it all together as we prepare to move out into the world, back into the busyness, the craziness of our lives. We're stepping out of this pure land that we've been creating. So what I wanted to do was focus a little bit on what has been unfolding, what has been evolving over the weekend. And as I said yesterday, feels like much longer, the Amitabha and the practices that we've been beginning to explore are coming from the Mahayana tradition, from the Pure Land practices. And sometimes we can get carried away with the idea of the Pure Land practices being something that's going to take us to the Pure Land and we're all going to live happily ever after, or whatever, towards enlightenment. But the practices are much deeper than that. They're not just about being born in the Pure Lands. What we're really doing with the practices, with the visualizations, with everything that we've been doing over the weekend, is immersing ourselves in the Dharma teachings and in practice, ultimately for enlightenment, not just for ourselves, but for enlightenment of all beings. We're turning up so that each and every one of us here can become enlightened, and each and every living being that has ever been here in the vastness of space and time will eventually reach enlightenment. And the Pure Land practices can be understood on two levels. We can have the transcendental level and we can have the ordinary, the mundane level. And the ordinary mundane level is sort of what we've been doing, where we've been heading off into the setting sun out there into the west. For me, every time we've done that, I can't help but be standing on the cliffs of Moher. There's a particular spot there that I love, just looking out over the ocean. I always stay a wee bit in from the edge, haven't quite mastered that fear of looking down. And I often, before I came to Buddhism, I would have imagined Tir na Nog out there in the distance. And this morning, when I was reflecting on the weekend that we've been having, I was reminded of the story of Oisin and Tir na Nog, and sure, I was off then. I was I have a whole other retreat ready now, but just based on how perhaps Tir na Nog is the Buddha land even of Amitabha. Wouldn't that be wonderful? You know, when you think about it, Oisin went there off with Niamh on the white horse, and he lived for 300 years before he returned. Because the land had magical qualities. The land had the quality of eternal youth. And if you remember, I spoke yesterday about the bowl in Amitabha's hand, holding Amrita, the nectar of immortality. Anyway, I'll say no more about that. I've just planted that seed and who knows where it'll go. But anyway, this is the thing about the ordinary, the mundane aspect of what we've been doing is that we can forget, we can imagine that the Pure Land, that Shunyata, that the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are something, someone, some whatever out there, something for us to move toward, to grasp after. But when we look at it from the transcendental point of view, actually, it's already within us. So what we've actually been doing this weekend is that we have been creating a Pure Land as a Sangha, as a group together, meditating, practicing, learning, discussing. But we've also been going inward. We've also been creating the Pure Land within our own minds. And we're doing that all the time, coming back to that first verse of the Dhammapada. We're constantly, everything in our experience is created by mind. And I don't know about you, but the world that I create with my mind a lot of the time isn't really a pure land. It's more like a chaotic land with a lot of contracting and self-righteousness and indignation and all sorts of other interesting mental states. But actually, we all have the capacity to change that within our minds. And that's what we've been exploring this weekend on that deeper level. That's what we've been doing. Again, that excites me. That really does excite me. You know, sometimes when we're describing, as I said yesterday, I often talk about the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas as people, as sort of almost like solid entities, you know, like him and her, and I talk about their qualities. And it's almost as if I'm talking about people in the same way as I would describe or talk about any one of you if I was saying, you know, so-and-so lives here and they do this and da-da-da-da. But of course, when we start to explore within meditation, when we start to recollect or visualize, we begin to realize that these beings are usually more made of light, they're more made of flow, they're translucent, they're transparent. We use all of these words. We always start with the blue sky of Shunyata, the blue sky of emptiness, that vast blue sky. Or as it was described recently on a retreat I was on, that warm blue sky. It always does it for me. And so Amitabha, as with all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, yes, we can see him as this being external to us. Yes, we can visualize because that helps us access something deeper. But what Amitabha is, as with all of the beings that we focus on and we recollect, they're actually a representation of the purified nature of our mind. They're a representation of the aspects of enlightenment. They're all representing qualities of enlightenment. And the Pure Lands come from that pure nature of mind. So what happens is that as we imagine these Buddhas, these Bodhisattvas, as we recollect them, as we visualize them, as we begin to explore their qualities, starting with color, with shape, with all of the symbolism, as we begin to go deeper into what each of those qualities are and how they manifest for us in the world, we're getting into deeper aspects of our own mind. And last night I read the Bardo Tadal at the puja, and we heard about how we asked Amitabha to come with his hook and bring us off to the Pure Land. Again, it's not that Amitabha is going to come down on that chariot as it is described in the sutras. He's not going to come and whip us away into this wonderful Buddha land. What it's actually pointing to is that at the point of death, we meditate. The Bardo Tadal is actually a meditation practice book that we can explore during life. And then the practice would be that someone reads it to us as we're dying, and then in the days after death. That would be traditionally what happens in the Eastern cultures where it's used. And so that's pointing to something else. You know, we can do the 10, you know, Amitabha, Amitabha, Amitabhas like I did yesterday, and then just sit back and do nothing. Or we can do what we're really being asked to do, which is the practice of meditation, the practice of ethics, the practice of, well, actually, I'll go into the rest in a few minutes. Because that's what is going to purify our minds. That is what is going to bring us to enlightenment, ultimately. And why do we want to do that? Well, for some of us, we're just here because we want to make life a little bit more comfortable. We want to feel better within ourselves, and that's a really good starting point. Personally, I've taken it to a whole other level, nothing short of enlightenment and beyond for me. So it really does depend on where we're at within our own lives and within our own practice. So how do we go about it? Well, as I said, the practices. We've got really, really good guidelines, actually. And there is so much information out there. There's so many different ways of doing it. So what I've done is I've really just condensed it into a little short list that we can begin with, because we could just get very, very overwhelmed with all of this. And I want to keep stressing that actually what we've been doing this weekend is a really good starting point. We've been meditating, we've been chanting, we've been hopefully practicing the precepts. We've at least been chanting them. And we've been spending time together as Sangha. I always have to introduce, in some way, shape, or form, the practice of mindfulness, no matter what I do, because I feel so passionately about it. So, of course, the practice of mindfulness plays a very big part in all of this. Constantly in our day, if we can keep coming back to the present moment and just checking in and just noticing, what am I doing right now? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? What's unfolding right now? We can have the practice of recollection, as I've said. We have the threefold path or the eightfold path. I have a mental block about lists, as some of you know, so I remember the threefold path much more easily: ethics, meditation, and wisdom. But of course, it is sort of the shorter version of the eightfold path. We have the 5 precepts that we've been chanting all weekend. We have the practice of the Brahma Viharas, which are metta or loving kindness, karuna, which is compassion, mudita, sympathetic joy, and equanimity, or upekkha or upeksha. So we can practice them, and I know some of you do those practices. We have the 6 paramitas, the 6 perfection practices, and they are generosity or dana, ethics or sila, patience or kshanti. And I like the description of patience as patient forbearance. So it's not gritted teeth patience, it's actually a much softer thing. We have the practice of vigor, the energy in pursuit of the good, or virya. We have the practice of concentration, or dhyana. and the practice of wisdom, prajna. So you'll see that we're coming towards wisdom in a few of these. On the more practical day-to-day level, we can do things like we need to read the Dharma. We need to listen to the talks, and we have some really good resources. We have, well, these talks are going to be on YouTube, so YouTube is now part of it, but we have things like the Buddhist Center Online, we have free Buddhist audio, and there are some very, very rich talks on the Dharma in those areas. Meditation. Having a daily meditation practice, really, those of us, we know when we practice every day, when we meditate every day, how much better we feel. For those of us who, let it slip, we feel the difference. So what we're doing is that we're staying in those more positive, skillful mental states by simply turning up to our meditation, to our cushion every morning or every evening. The practice of recollecting the Buddhas. I mean, this is a really interesting one. What you can do is that you can quite literally just visualize the Buddha or a Bodhisattva in front of you. So in this case, it would be Amitabha. You can chant his mantra and just imagine him in front of you, or like in the Bardo Todal, that he's leading the path. He's walking the path in front of you. Sometimes how I do it, though, is that I simply speak to them and just imagine that they're there with me. And I sometimes imagine that I can hear them speaking back. I don't admit that in every aspect of my life or to everyone. Those friends who are psychiatrists, I'm a bit more careful how I word it. But that idea of speaking and listening and hearing, that's how I do it. And it works for me. So what we're doing when we're recollecting is that we're recollecting the positive, inspiring aspects of their nature. So it might be his color, Amitabha's color. It might be his compassionate wisdom. It might simply be the smile or the mudra. So starting there and then allowing that to grow and expand and open like that lotus flower. Other ways that we can do it is, to get into those more positive ways of being internally, is that we can just get out into nature. Again, where I am today, getting out into nature may not get you into a very positive mental state. It's rather wet and windy out there at the moment. So it might be better just to go to an art gallery today and really get immersed in the beautiful artwork. So there's some ideas. But here's the bigger challenge now. Creating the Buddha land, creating our sukhavati in our day-to-day lives. How do we bring it in there? We make every moment of our day an opportunity for learning and practicing the Dharma. That's what we're doing. That's the idea of going to Sukhavati, is that we have the ideal conditions to be there. We have and therefore to move toward enlightenment. We have the wind rustling in the trees, and we hear the Dharma teachings. All I can hear is the wind howling at the window, and I'm hoping that you all can't hear it. I'm certainly not so sure about, I suppose if I think about it, yeah, impermanence is there because I know it will stop. But it takes a wee bit longer for me to get there. So making every opportunity I can an opportunity for practicing and learning, just like I did with the wind when I teased it out. Starting to see one another, starting to see others in our lives through the eyes of wisdom and compassion. It's not always easy to do that, is it? What would it be like if we could, though? Of course, for many of us in the West, very often the starting point for us is self-compassion. We need to start with bringing kindness to ourselves and our experience. And then naturally what can happen is that we can begin to see others through those filters, those views that we're beginning to develop. I have the just like me practice. And so what that for me is that what I try to do is if I'm noticing that aspect of self beginning to contract and go into maybe righteous indignation, or I'm, sitting in traffic and judging somebody, or, I don't know, giving out in general, I remind myself, I stop, I take the breath, hence there's the mindfulness coming in, and I simply remind myself, I don't know what's going on for that person. Just like me, ultimately, they're trying to avoid suffering. They just want to be happy, just like I do. And it's quite remarkable what can happen in the experience when we do a practice like that. It doesn't always work. So for some of us, we have the practice, the opportunity, I should say, for the higher practices, as I would call them, where we meet particularly strong gurus. And this is where we might be doing some of these practices and we have an expectation that they're going to behave a particular way, or that we're going to suddenly feel wonderful. And it doesn't always happen like that. So what's going on there is that it has now become an opportunity to go, okay, so what is happening here? What am I clinging on to here? Is it a view? Is it an aspect of self? What is it about this person that reminds me of myself or someone else? There's lots of really, really good questions that we can ask ourselves. So it's become an opportunity for practicing insight, for practicing quite possibly patient forbearance or kshanti. We'll definitely be moving towards wisdom. We may need a certain amount of energy to do it, because sometimes it could be easier just to go, here, I can't be bothered. I'll just give out about them. I'll feel better at the end of it. And that's a really good starting point. But it's also, although I'm actually coming to a close, what I will say to you is that this close is really a beginning, because this is the beginning of new opportunities for each and every one of us. Already, the next aspect of our lives, of our practice, is unfolding. That lotus flower is continuing to bloom, to open. All we have to do now is turn up. And we can ask Amitabha to help us. And his infinite compassion and wisdom, he will help us. And when you think about his family, you've got Tara, so if Amitabha can't make it, I'm sure Tara will pop up for you, or Padmasambhava. But just simply coming back to that red light of Amitabha, if that's what works for you, that peaceful practice at sunset, just letting go of the day, winding down to let new opportunities begin. The rising of the sun or the moon. I'll just finish with a verse. May I always hear the song of the insubstantiality of things, in the wind, in the falling rain, in the rising sun, the setting sun, in the play of the clouds, in the sound of voices, in the changing patterns of light. Following the path of Amitabha, may I become a resource for all beings. So we're going to move into the groups. And what I would say is, just reflect on what I've suggested. It may not have been what you were expecting, but see what you can take from this morning's talk and how you're going to bring Amitabha and Amitabha's Pure Land into your day-to-day life, even for the next week, and perhaps commit to something. I'm not asking you to make 48 vows or even 18, even one. Thank you.
Thanks, Atulyamitra. that was another wonderful, generous outpouring of wisdom and practicality. And it kind of reminds me of a quote: "This very body, the Buddha, this very place, the lotus paradise." And he gave us very practical instructions on how to build the Buddha land right here, right now. So sadhu, and thank you.